Hello, everyone, and welcome on this Wednesday, August 12th. I'm your host, Northrup, and I'm joined by my co-host for the first time, I think, in about 3 weeks now, Lucas Grandsire. What's up, Lucas?
Hey, what's going on, man? Glad to make the big return. We're back. I was afraid it was going to be just alternating hosts, but we're back strong too with our first our first guest that's coming back for a second time. So it's a sign that things are going well for us.
Yeah, you're stealing my thunder a little bit there. That was my big intro. But yes, our first guest, our first guest who has made 2 appearances, James Lynch. Everybody, what's up, James?
I'm doing well, guys. Thanks for having me on. If your audience is wondering why we're a little bit late, it's all on me, so my apologies. But thanks for having me back on again. I appreciate it. I believe it's called returning guest, Lucas, but you were close.
Well, see, English is my second language, so I'm trying the best I can. Like, you guys can't go after an immigrant like that. Like, I'm trying my hardest.
And we're all here. That's the most important thing. And what a time for sports. Me and Lucas were kind of talking off air, but I think there was like fights every day this week since last Friday. And then we're coming off a pretty big weekend too, I thought, as far as Friday Bellator and then UFC on Saturday as well. I mean, I think Dylan Dennis had about 3 call-outs, which is a typical night, I feel like, in Bellator. And not even Bellator, UFC too sometimes, but and then Derek Lewis as well. He obviously with the talk about going to the bathroom on the air and everything. But we also had a Contender Series yesterday too, and I want to talk to you about that to start the show, James, because I saw you were kind of on Twitter. You had mentioned about TJ Laramie, how you kind of have followed him, kind of getting up to this point, and one of the 5 guys signed last night. What did you kind of make of all of that?
Yeah, it was cool. I was happy to see TJ get the contract. I think anyone who's followed TJ's career for a while knew that it was only a matter of time. And I was a little bit worried because that fight ended with an injury, even though Laramie was in a dominant position. But glad to see he got it. Excited to see what he can do in the UFC. Still only 22 years old, which is really incredible to see him get to that level at such a young age. But I'm excited because, up here in Canada, we've been lacking a lot of fighters in the UFC lately. So it's good to see a bit of a resurgence. We've had Tanner Boser with his mullet earlier this year, really make some noise. And now Laramie, a nice addition there as well. And I have a feeling we're going to see a few more Canadians from Contender Series in the UFC this year as well. Some really promising prospects.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was kind of a strange night too with like the injuries, because you had that injury. Then the main event too with Pfeiffer. I mean, that was pretty bizarre.
Yeah, it was 2 injuries in one card, two contracts. So we'll see if that ever happens again. Pretty rare, but it's obviously you like to see a decisive win, but you know what? It's part of the game. I mean, people do get injured, and good to see those guys get the contracts anyways, because we've had situations in the past where fighters have been injured or things have happened and they just called the fight and the fighter never got the contract. So glad to see Dana White recognize their performance leading up to that, and I thought it was the right call.
Yeah. Now, I know the time zones as far as like everything, Lucas, are kind of funny with the UFC's broadcast, but were you able to catch last night's event?
No, I wasn't able to. I was following along as much as I could, like who was coming on the show and stuff like that. And TJ Laramie, obviously, I was like, it's James Lynch's guy. Like, he'll finally get signed, and that'll be something good for them. But yeah, I wasn't able to watch it. Plus, last night we had family over, and in France, when you have family over for a small dinner, it lasts like 7 hours. It never ends. So, that just kind of ruined it for me. I was exhausted.
And before we move on too, James, like as far as like what you're talking about, like TJ Laramie too, but like, is there anyone else that stands out that someone you were covering and when they got that call, that one that maybe like just maybe pops in your head, among some others?
Yeah, sure. Eric Anders, he was a guy that I interviewed, I think after this like 4th or 5th pro fight, a little bit later in his career than TJ. TJ was just after his 2nd pro fight, but it's been cool because it was only a few years later that Eric was like in a main event fighting Lyoto Machida. So, we've talked about this before, sort of the landscape of media and how people should be covering the sport. And I really can't emphasize how important it is to interview prospects, because you develop those relationships early on. You get to understand, sort of what they're going through to get to that level. And I think it gives a lot of people perspective in terms of what fighters are dealing with on the regional scene. So it's really, like you saw that tweet yesterday, it is very rewarding to interview someone over the last couple of years and then see them achieve that dream and get to that level. So it's awesome, man. Like I couldn't be happier for TJ, and we got to be unbiased in the sport. I might have been a little biased last night, but that's fine, because it's cool to just see these guys put the work in and see them achieve their dreams essentially of getting in the UFC.
Yeah. Is there anyone that comes to your mind, Lucas, that you had maybe like a similar scenario?
Well, there's someone actually just today, like someone I've been interviewing for just a little bit, was Kai Kamaka III. I talked to him after his LFA fight. I think we found out today he got signed for the UFC, which his situation, like his management, they were good. Like they got him in a good spot. But yeah, him off the top of my head. there's a few that I interviewed, like Malcolm Gordon and stuff during the pandemic, who ended up getting signed. So I don't really count them because I got you like right before. But I haven't been covering long enough to be like James Lynch, where I can give you an hour-long list of every guy I got. Mm-hmm. But I'm pretty good about getting a few of them.
Yeah. Yeah, back when because I ran like a hyper local like MMA site just in New Jersey and like New York, and I was like fresh out of high school, so it was like 2011. But Aljamain Sterling was coming up then, so I used to interview him after the fights all the time. George Sullivan, who he kind of came and went already in the UFC, but I think more recently, like Joe Solecki is someone who I think about. I remember when he got that first round submission win too. That was like pretty exciting just to see a guy who came there, and he was a guy who was thinking about quitting right before he got the call to Contender Series too. So that always kind of like stuck out in my mind.
I just quickly interrupt. I actually just interviewed Joe for the first time yesterday. He's a really good interview, and I'm glad you brought him up. And we all work for the same site, My MMA News. Quick shout out to Eric Kowal because he's always focused on prospects, and I think that's one of the reasons why his site has continued to be very successful. And I like that they're a platform for that because a lot of these bigger sites, we see a little bit more prospect coverage. But I remember a couple of years ago, you couldn't find an LFA interview on one of those bigger sites. So it's really cool to see that they've been emphasizing that because it really does pay off, especially with things like Contender Series now, where you're just seeing an influx of these prospects that, a lot of people have been watching our interviews because we've been interviewing these guys on the come up.
For sure. Yeah, I was just thinking too, like I saw that you had interviewed Jasmine Jasudavicius, who fights tomorrow night at CFFC. I talked to her from Miami News as well.
Yeah, no, she's great. And Aaron Jeffrey's another one. They're all in the same management. Like it's going to be very interesting to see the next couple of years, some of the new wave of the prospects coming through here because, in a lot of situations, like, two of those names you just mentioned, Jazz and Aaron, I mean, they're fighting really solid competition. So I know when they get to the UFC, they're going to be mainstays. They're not going to be 0-2 and out of there, right? So that's one important thing too, when you look at these prospects, who are they fighting? Because I think we saw that last night in that Adrian Yanez fight where he's fighting a guy who's not fighting the level of competition Adrian is, and Adrian showed why he deserves a UFC contract. So, can't talk enough prospects, guys. Honestly, it's my wheelhouse.
It's funny. Just throw a shout out there. When I joined SureDog last year, the big thing, they were like, we want this many interviews. And I was like, okay, fine. But the big thing is I want to have that freedom to interview everybody. Because, I've had a few websites, especially when I was working for MMA World, the YouTube channel. It was like, we want the cream of the crop. We want like UFC, we want the names. But it's like, man, if I can't talk to those prospects, like that sort of makes my job a lot more difficult. So, SureDog was great about, you can talk to anyone. So I'm still able to do prospects. So I'm definitely noticing that websites are getting a little bit better about, covering the prospects too. Like they see the long-term investment.
Exactly. I'm glad you brought that up. It is an investment. That's because you're not going to get the hits. You're not going to get I'm not going to have an interview, that's going to blow up. It's funny now because I was just looking through my interviews with TJ Laramie like last night, and I noticed the hits are like way up, obviously because people have been looking at him. But I remember when I first did that interview, I'd be lucky if I get like 100 views. But now I've seen some that are almost hitting 1,000. So it's really cool to see, being with these guys from the start because you never know, the interest or where they could go in their career.
Yeah, for sure. And for people that maybe are just listening for the first time too, this show is kind of MMA reporters talking to MMA reporters. We'll have a little discussion with James about MMA reporting, and then kind of dive into a little debate of like hot topics. So James, one of the reasons we want to have you back on too is I know last time we had you on, we talked a lot about like your YouTube channel, and at that time you were still with the Score. You weren't able to really do too much on that YouTube channel. You were kind of doing more stuff towards journalists and things like that, like tips, guides, that kind of thing. But what has this last month kind of been like for you with, all the change?
It's been crazy, but in a good way. I'm actually really happy what I'm getting to do right now. It's funny because I remember when I was on your show, I just got let go, but no one knew the news, and I didn't want to say anything. It would have been kind of awkward.
It was like the next day.
Yeah, it was like the next day. So, and it was totally out of the blue. Like I don't mind talking about it. It was just I got a message that morning. We got to have a meeting in the morning, and that was it. I'm done. Forget about your year of work. Forget about everything else. We're shutting down the channel. It's like I never even existed. It was like the Matrix. So I get it. They're running a business. I've always told people this, no matter what. If you're working full time in this industry, because I've worked in sports long enough where I know, anything can change at the flip of a hat. Look at what happened to The Athletic since we last spoke as well. They cut a lot of people as well too. So look, I'm not surprised, but you got to adapt. I think that day, I did your podcast. I didn't, wallow in my sorrows, so to speak. I actually had interviews scheduled that day. I still did them because it's like, I can put this on my channel. So it was unexpected, but I've made it work. I'm working for like, no joke, like 10 companies right now, providing interviews, and it's been great. It's a lot more work, but it's rewarding because I'm getting to talk to way more people, kind of what I was doing before. And I have the freedom to interview who I want, and I can make my schedule, and it's not easy, but I'm making it work. And financially, I'm in a good spot. That was the biggest thing I was worried about, because I think when I was freelance before, I had a bunch of outlets where they were solid pay or whatever. And now I'm back to square one, starting back up again. And, some of those outlets I worked for before, they're not hiring at the moment. So I had to, improvise and find other ways. Like literally just before I got on here, I'll tell you why I was late. I'm actually doing this one company I work for, Line Movement. They do a hockey show. So I'm actually doing some social media clips for them. So I was actually clipping some stuff from their show today. So like, that's fun for me. That's something I couldn't have done when I was at the previous company I was working for. So I'm getting to do some other stuff and really just, being more versatile in my skill set. And it's been great. Like, honestly, it's a lot of work, but it's worth it. I really love what I'm doing right now.
Yeah. I was going to say too, like, what is the biggest positive from that? Like, from working for like one single entity to working for like multiple platforms? Is it kind of like what you just said too? Like maybe just like a little bit of freedom and versatility?
Oh, well, there's a lot of benefits of going full time. I mean, I don't have to worry about money. It's a steady paycheck. Like I'm getting paid the same amount if I work, this hard this week or I don't, right? So you have the financial freedom as someone who's a dad and I have a family and a mortgage. Like it's nice to just get that regular paycheck. Plus I had benefits. So if I had to go to the doctor or something, that's all covered, right? Like I wouldn't have to worry about any of that. Whereas now I got to pay out of pocket a little bit or use my wife's benefits or whatever. So it's tougher financially, but the freedom is amazing. Not that I was really stifled in my last position, but it's just nice that I can, like, for example, I'm taking this Friday off. Like, I don't have to tell anyone. Like, I obviously tell some people that I'm going to be off, but I can just do that, and it's not a thing, right? Like, I can just take the time off. So it's been, the full time has its benefits, but at the same time, like, you don't have the freedom that you'd have. Like, I can take anything I want. I can work and do whatever I want right now, and I don't have anyone saying like you can't do that. I can do what I want, so to speak. It's great.
And so when you got the news from the score, unfortunately, like I know we talked about a lot of the negatives and stuff. Was there at any moment where you felt maybe some kind of relief, like, maybe I can sort of change the content I'm making, or if you like being freelance before, like, was there any kind of relief at all?
There was, yeah. I don't want to go into detail about this because there's some stuff that happened behind the scenes, but I will mention that, like, I would have been more devastated if this was a job where I saw like a really long-term future. I think some of the decisions they made, I didn't really agree with. I felt like I was kind of being limited in a lot of ways, some ideas that I wanted to do. So yeah, I think to be completely honest with you guys now, and I'm not even like saying this just because of the position I'm in now, but I think my career will be better going forward being in the position I'm in now because I have more freedom. I'm making more connections. I'm able to get more opportunities that I couldn't have had before because I was stuck in sort of this position. And not just that, but the audience I was catering to to casual fans. You know how annoying that is? Like, I'm trying to do like a good interview with someone and, people are like, this guy sucks. Or like, it's just, you're dealing with a not very well-educated MMA audience for the most part. You're not. I mean, you guys know casual fans. There's people out there that think that, if George St. Pierre come back, do you think he could beat Brock Lesnar? Like those types of people, that's who I'm dealing with. Right. So I don't have to deal with that now. I get to deal with people who are, appreciate the content a lot more. And so there's been a big positive with that. So honestly, like it's great. Would I go full-time again? Absolutely. If the right situation came up, but I don't think I'd ever be a part of something where they want me to build it up. Because guess what? Like I won't say, I understand what it's like to run a company and I've worked in the sports industry long enough where I know that anything can change at a flip of a hat, but the numbers speak for itself. 24,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel, 10 million views in over a year. And, I'm sure the brand did help. Who I was working for, but a lot of that was me. And I think when I left, I think it's proof that, it was more about me than it was about the brand, because the fact that I've got so much work after this, I think just speaks, and I'm not trying to sound conceited, but I think that, people knew what they were getting with me. So it's like, it wasn't because of where I came from. It's because of the work I did. So it was kind of a long-winded answer, but you get what I'm saying. Yeah.
Going back to like we were talking about like the audience too, what has the feedback been like since going back like on your YouTube channel, posting more, that kind of thing?
People have been really happy. I think people, especially doing the prospect stuff, because it was really limited. Like how I was having to do it before was I had that weekly show and like maybe I could get a prospect in on that show. And it was a 2-hour show. As you guys know, I could put however many guests I wanted, but they get buried with everyone else. So it really wasn't the same. Whereas now I can get those individual interviews up, I can get them up right away. I can post them whenever I want. And, you're getting that feedback and I'm getting back to doing because I love interviewing prospects and I love interviewing up and comers because you get to sort of follow them along in that journey. And there was times, I'd watch other people do interviews. I was like, man, I wish I could interview that person, but I can't because I got to, worry about, numbers and all this stuff. And obviously that is important, but a lot of the places I work now, they see the investment. They're not so worried about, how many views is this going to get, because realistically they know that I'm going to do a good job. The interview is going to be solid. And that's why the opportunities have come my way.
And something I've noticed this time around with your run, it seems like there's a little bit less of a focus on sort of building up your YouTube channel. Like I'm noticing that there's a lot of stuff on Lynch MMA, I think for prospects and stuff like that. We saw, you're doing stuff for different channels. What's kind of the game plan in terms of, building your own brand? Like, is that something like you're satisfied with and it's about getting the gigs? Like I have noticed there's sort of a different approach this time around.
Yeah. So a lot of the outlets I work for now, they want me to just upload the content on their channel, and that's fine. Like it's understandable that they want, me to help build up their specific YouTube channels. I get it. It's totally fine. Before I would sort of work out a deal where I could either double upload or I could, maybe I would, work out a less of a price if I could put it on my channel. But I just found it's easier to just let them have the content and then I can sort of figure it out from there. There are some ways around it. Some of the outlets I work for, they do let me like post some clips on there and then that will lead to the channel. But what I've noticed with YouTube is that you got to have the views a little bit higher. So that's why I have that second channel. So a lot of my prospect interviews live there. I'm not making any money off of it, but at least it's like another like place I can put my interviews and I own the content. So eventually if that channel does end up getting monetized, then I can make some money off of it. But for now, I just put all the, sort of the lower level interviews on there. And my main channel is focused on interview clips, Q&As, preview shows, things like that, the pros picks. So those will continue to make money for me because obviously, like especially the pros picks, like they're still continuing to do well. But yeah, that's sort of how I've changed the approach. And what I do to get around it, if people are looking for the interviews, is I just put my interviews in playlists. So at least you can watch it on there. You just won't get the notifications. So I've had to alter that strategy a little bit because I notice a lot of outlets now, they pretty much just want you to have it on their channel. And I get it. I would do the double upload thing, but I actually got YouTube actually like flagged me. This was actually even before I went full time because they don't like it when you double upload content. So I've kind of avoided that, sort of gone the clips route a little bit with some of my interviews, but mostly it's just, like I said, live stream stuff, pros picks, whatever I can get that I can just add on that channel that's going to view well. Most of the stuff I have on there, you'll see is at least hitting 1,000 views.
All right, well, I guess we'll move on to the debate portion of the show now. How I mentioned at the top of the show, a lot to get into. We had Bellator, we had UFC. But one of the things I want to start with is Michael Chandler, because obviously everyone knows at the end of his contract, that was his final fight. And I mean, what a way to go out. You not only do you knock out Benson Henderson first round, but that's the first time Henderson's been finished in 6 years. So for you guys, what do you think is next? What's most likely for Michael Chandler? And we'll start with James.
He's going to the UFC. I'm pretty sure because here's a couple of reasons. I was talking about this morning on another podcast. I think financially Michael Chandler's in a good spot. He's made a lot of money in Bellator. He's been one of the faces of the promotion. And I think now is time for the next challenge. Like he just got a big win over a pretty notable guy, a guy who can still compete at a high level in Benson Henderson. And you mentioned he hadn't been finished since 2014. So that's a statement. I mean, his free agency stock could not be better right now. I just don't know what more he has to accomplish in Bellator. There's the rematch with Pitbull for the title. I get it. But is that like a money fight for him? No, I think he knows that if he goes to the UFC, he could probably make pretty decent money. I don't think he's going to get the type of money that like Eddie Alvarez and Hector Lombard got because, he did lose some fights in Bellator. Remember, Will Brooks beat him. I mean, doesn't that seem like a crazy stat if you look back on it now with how Will Brooks' career has turned out? But, I think he'll go over there, get some decent money. And I think he wants to challenge himself. He's in the prime of his career right now. I think the UFC makes the most sense for him just because there'll be better matchups for him. There could be better paydays. And I think he's already made enough money in Bellator at this point too, that I don't think it's about the money now for him. I just get that sense. This is all a hunch. I don't have any inside info, but I think he will go there. And I don't see him going to one because, they've got plenty of struggles right now with the pandemic, getting fighters overseas. I mean, the logistics of that just seems like a nightmare. Like, look at all their American fighters like Sage Northcutt and Eddie Alvarez and Demetrius Johnson. Like, they're not fighting anytime soon because they're having to deal with these challenges with COVID. So I think it's going to be that. I know some other people mentioned PFL. They're probably not going to get their season going again until next year. So I don't think he wants to wait around that long. So if I had to guess, I'd say he's probably going to the UFC next.
What do you think, Lucas?
Man, I have to agree with James. I mean, everything's right there in the answer. I mean, if you want to start it off, like, first of all, look at sort of process of elimination, right? Like, would he re-sign for Bellator? Like, it'd be weird if he says all the stuff he's saying and then ends up signing with Bellator anyways. Like, I feel like even Michael Chandler would be disappointed if he re-signed with them. James mentioned PFL. Listen, PFL, they're trying to hold on to their own guys. Like, how many of their fighters are coming out saying, like, listen, you're not going to let me fight, release me. So just that already, I'm like, listen, I know there's the $1 million payday, and you sort of look at it like Michael Chandler could be good, but PFL doesn't seem that realistic. One championship, no American fighters are fighting. Aside from the fight with Eddie Alvarez, I really don't see what's out there for him. And then you try to look at some of the other promotions. I feel like it has to be the UFC. I think legacy-wise, I'm sure money-wise, like the UFC is going to do what they have to do. Like they've made things happen when they needed to. So for me, it has to be the UFC. I don't see any scenario where it makes sense for Michael Chandler to do anything other than the UFC. And I'd be very disappointed to see him re-sign for Bellator. Like, when people are like, what's next for him? Rematches, prelim UFC lightweights and stuff. It's kind of like, you've done everything you need to do with Bellator. It just really doesn't make that sense for him not to sign with the UFC.
I'm actually going to disagree with you guys. I feel a little differently about this. I'm not trying to be hip or anything like that, but I had talked to Chandler in the post-fight press conference on Friday too, and I had asked him about leverage, and I said, how much leverage do you feel like this gives you now? Because just the way he got the win and everything, and I mean, what a time to do it. But it just seemed like too, he's like, I don't want to call it leverage, and he just seemed like he was like, these are people, and he just wasn't talking about a business standpoint. And when you were talking James too, like what more does, and I think Lucas said the same thing, like what more does he have to do there? I do agree with that in a sense, but I also felt like that was something that he kind of brought up during the press conference and didn't make it seem like that was something he was like really after. It seemed like he wants to go somewhere where he's just going to, with like, as far as like a family and just what's the best off. And I just find a hard time like seeing Coker and company kind of get like, let a guy like go. Like I have a feeling that whatever the UFC does, Bellator is going to fight tooth and nail to try to keep this guy, because I think Chandler said it the best too. He said that, he's obviously brought Bellator to where it is today, and Bellator's brought him to where he is today. And I just find it hard of them kind of letting that go.
But you know what? He could be playing possum by saying that leverage thing, because if he goes out there and says, I deserve a huge payday, that's what happened to Ben Askren to a certain degree when he was a free agent with Bellator. He wanted the most money. UFC's like, look, you're going to decision a lot of these fights. Like, we're not. And remember, they told him to go to World Series of Fighting, like some BS like that. But like that was the time when Askren could have gone to the UFC, and he didn't because of whatever. I know there's some politics and stuff, but I think it's also because he said, look, like I'm undefeated at the time. Like I need a big payday, and so I wonder if it's a possum thing there as well, as far as him being like, you know what, I don't want any leverage, and then the UFC will give him like a fair offer and go from there. Because I don't know, I get the sense it's not really about the money for him, because he's made a lot. Like you look, like I feel like every time I go on Facebook, he's doing that ad for the massager or whatever. Like he's got other stuff going on as far as income. And look at who his teammates are at Sanford MMA. He's got Gilbert Burns and Jared Gordon and all these guys that are fighting at that level. I'm sure he's training with them and being like, you know what, like I can hang with these guys. I'm going to see what happens. So I just get this hunch that I think he will go to the UFC, and I don't, like I said, they're not going to dig into their pockets, especially now, to try and sign him. I don't think the Michael Chandler now is as valuable as the Michael Chandler that had beat Eddie Alvarez for the title way back when. But still, I think that he is someone that would add something quite good to the lightweight division. Yeah.
I mean, the possum thing could very well be a real thing. I don't know. I thought it was like a little more genuine that, but then again, it's like you said, it's a hunch. That's just kind of what I took out of the whole thing. Lucas, you want to add anything to that?
No, I mean, listen, you mentioned leverage and stuff like that. All of this is negotiation. I mean, listen, you have to be realistic. Like, what if the UFC doesn't come? So you got to make sure you got some kind of leverage towards Bellator. You got to make sure that, like if you tell the UFC, like, please sign me, I'm here for you guys, I love you, you're going to get that 10K for 10K deal, despite the fact that you're Michael Chandler. So for me, everything is a negotiation tactic. I believe nothing. These fighters are going to tell the media whatever they need to in order to get the most money and stuff. So I'm taking a lot of the stuff that he's saying very like, all right, man. I mean, you're saying it, but it's I don't think you need to take everything he says to heart. Like you got to think he's pretty much enemies with all these promotions. Like it's about who can he leverage to get the most money from, whether he's financially well set or not. Like you got to do what you got to do. So I'm very cautious when it comes to everything Michael Chandler's saying.
And moving on to our next thing, going into the world of the UFC a little bit. Chris Weidman, obviously, first win in 3 years, unanimous decision win over Omari Akhmedov. Sorry, got a little struggle there. But look, what did you guys kind of just make of his performance? Being that it just seemed like he got some negative criticism for how he did. I guess it was like the classic wrestling performance, but I mean, it was kind of a must win for Weidman at this point. What did you guys make of it? We'll start with James.
I thought it was a good win. It wasn't the type of win that makes you think he's back at that championship level. Him talking about he wants top 5 guys. I don't know how he'll do. I mean, it wasn't an easy fight for him, and I'm not taking anything away from Akhmedov. He had a nice win heading into that fight over Ian Heinisch, who's a guy that's pretty, he's a top guy in the middleweight division himself. But I just think that Omari kind of threw that fight away. I thought in that second round he was really taking over, and for whatever reason he couldn't put it together and really capitalize. And Weidman's wrestling ultimately led him to victory. But I don't feel confident in Weidman beating anyone in the top 5 right now. I don't even think he beats like a Darren Till or Jack Hermanson. I think he could maybe beat like a Marvin Vettori, but it wasn't the type of win. Like I'm not there's sort of a scale on this, right? Like I've seen people saying like, oh, Weidman, he won, he's done. He's not, I don't think he's done. I think he's probably the gatekeeper at that weight class at this point. That's what he showed me on Saturday. Now look, first fight back at middleweight. Hasn't fought that much, has a lot of injuries. Yeah, maybe we need to give him another fight there and see how he does. But I think if it's any indication, usually when you got a guy who's getting older, taking a lot of damage, it doesn't bode very well. So I don't think championship Weidman's back. I think gatekeeper Chris Weidman's back. Not that he was ever there, but yeah, he's gatekeeper Weidman now.
Yeah, I mean, as sad as it is, because I think, and I especially have this problem where I always think like, listen, give the guy the right kind of matchup, and then that championship fighter is back. But I think this is kind of the one that tells you, listen, Chris Weidman, he's always been like an excellent wrestler who had that boxing. And so that wrestling, it means that he doesn't have to stay on the feet and, risk getting knocked out. Like he always has that, the famous, what we call it, lay and pray sort of style. So it's, it's good that he has the wrestling to fall back on. But in terms of this performance, I mean, we saw him pretend to be Wonder Boy for 2 minutes. It didn't really do anything because, you're heavier than Wonder Boy, you're slower than him. So that's not going to work. For me, it's the kind of performance like, okay, you beat the number 11 guy. He had some good wins, but I'm not confident coming off of it. And, I think it sort of made me think like, I hate telling guys to retire, but if he were to retire, I'd have no problem with it. Like, I just don't see a scenario where he's fighting the top 5 guys and beating them, where he's getting the belt. So it was a decent performance, and it showed us that if he needs to, he has the tools to win a fight. But in terms of, are we ever going to see the championship version of him again? Are we ever going to see him fight, even Derek Brunson at this point, who, is slowly going on a streak himself? Like, I feel like that time is done. And, the gatekeeper, like James mentioned, that's definitely where he is. But in terms of what he's getting paid, I'm just not sure the UFC is going to look at him like, listen, do we really want to pay a gatekeeper that much? So he's in a really tricky spot.
And I feel like a lot of that negative criticism, too, didn't come from almost the fight itself, but like what James said, too, he kind of was like, oh, after this, he was like, oh, I feel like I'm ready for those championship things. I think a lot of people were like, well, that wasn't really like a top 5 caliber performance.
Yeah, people don't like it when you're unrealistic. Like there's a difference between being confident and going out there and saying, like, for example, if Weidman had finished the fight and Beasley and was honest about his assessment, and I know it's easy for a guy behind a webcam right now to say this, but like if he had gone out there and said, look, it wasn't my best performance, but wait till you see the next fight. I'm going to show you guys that I can definitely fight with those guys in the top 5. Then fine. People would not give him much of a backlash. But he said after that fight that he's like, I'm ready to take on the top 5 guys. It's like, really? Like if you had gone out there and finished them in the first round, fair enough. But you went out there and won a decision, one that was a tough, hard fought decision. I don't think it gives fans any confidence themselves to feel like you can beat a Yoel Romero or an Israel Adesanya or Robert Whitaker or anyone like that. So I think that's where fans get upset. It's like, the same thing happened to Macy Barber when she's like, I'm going to be the youngest champion. And then everyone turned on her when she got absolutely destroyed by Roxanne Modafferi. So there's a point of being confident and being realistic. And I think Weidman has those lines blurred.
I think with Weidman, too, one of the reasons he might have said, too, is because, like what Lucas said, too, is he's older, so he's probably thinking, too, maybe the timetable, if he wants to do this, he's kind of got to do it now. But let's go into this a little more, too. I mean, who do you guys think would be the next best fit for him?
Marvin Vettori. I think that makes sense. I know Vittori's back in Italy, I believe, after I made that tweet yesterday about Hall being out. Everyone's like, he's in Italy. I was like, well, sorry. I said if. But no, I think someone like that, like someone within the top 15 that's like a manageable fight, or maybe you give him like a Brendan Allen. I don't know. Like you'd have to give him someone that I think you're going to build up that guy. That's sort of what I think at this point, because I don't feel, like I said, I don't feel confident in Weidman doing that. Now there's one other route you could take with this. Luke Rockhold says he's coming back. Run that back. Why not? Two decent names. Get as much as you can out of the name value with Weidman and with Rockhold. You could potentially do a trilogy with Anderson Silva if you wanted to. Like you could do the big name fights or the prospects, but I think it's one of those. You're not going to see him fight like an Akhmedov again. It's going to be someone that's an up and comer that you're looking to build, or a veteran like a Rockhold or Silva. I think that's what's going to happen.
Listen, I can appreciate James trying to be the man of reason, give him a prospect, try to see where he's at, build a guy up, but that is not the way to go with Chris Weidman. Chris Weidman is 36 years old. He's a big name. Now's the time to start running these fights back. Anderson Silva versus Weidman 3. Like for me, I saw that on Twitter from, I believe, Jose Youngs, and in my mind, I'm like, yes, that crap fest of a fight. I want to see that. Rematch against Luke Rockhold. Listen, they both want it. People seem to want it. For me, that's the kind of route you have to go. Like at some point you have to accept, and I know as a fighter it's difficult, like, listen, I'm probably not going to fight for the belt. And do you really want these prospects to go out there and style on you and make their names? That's kind of tough. But listen, if you can be some big fight, be on a good portion of like a pay-per-view when you're rematching Anderson Silva, Luke Rockhold. For me, that's more what you need to do, especially from the UFC's perspective. Like we said when he fought Dominic Reyes, like, yeah, but he's worth so much to the UFC that it's tough to have him fight prospects and stuff. If that's really the case, then have him fight these big names, these things with a storyline. Even Michael Bisping on UFC Tonight, when they were sort of going back and forth, that kind of fight would have made sense. But for me at this point, it's sort of try to find these fun fights until, at 36 years old, realistically, what does he have? Maybe 2 years left, something like that. And he's constantly injured. So for me, that's more the route you want to go, unless there's really that sort of Israel Adesanya type super prospect that you sort of want to go out there and get, lose against. But for me, the kind of route is, fun fights, storyline stuff, things that are going to boost the pay-per-view. But for me, that's what makes the most sense for him at this point.
Yeah, I was leaning towards like Luke Rockhold too, because I just thought as far as like almost even like pleasing Weidman too, I think if you're looking at that contract, that might be more appeasing to him too, just that name right off the bat, Luke Rockhold. It's like, oh, it's a chance for me to kind of get that revenge, that kind of thing, rather than, I think like Marvin Vettori, I think even like, I think if actually Weidman beat Vettori, I think that'd almost be more impressive to a lot of people compared to maybe beating Rockhold now. But I think maybe for Weidman, I feel like that might fight with Rockhold might be like a little more attractive.
Well, and you know what? If they're going to do the Rockhold fight, get them to do it at 205. Why get them to cut the extra weight? It's not like Weidman's going to be fighting for a title. Get them at their best when they're both looking good, and because they don't have to cut the extra weight. I think that would be more interesting if they did, because that's actually so. When they initially tried to rebook the fight, I forget this was like 2 years ago when they tried to do that fight. I think they were trying to make it at 205, but obviously there was an injury. So I'd like to see that happen.
So Weidman was obviously one of many winners this weekend, but when you have Bellator, you have UFC. I feel like there's so much fight you're consuming in 2 nights, and it sometimes it might be hard to stand out. For you guys, who is the biggest winner from this weekend? All promotions included. We'll start with James.
It's Michael Chandler, absolutely. I mean, he's going into free agency. He's at an interesting point in his career where he's not the champion, so he doesn't have to stay with Bellator. That was the issue with Eddie Alvarez when he tried to go to the UFC, is that he was still the champ. So there was all these issues about him trying to get out and how could they let a champion go type thing. So, with Chandler, they don't have to worry about that. So to me, it's because Chandler had a lot going into this. It's not like he's a young guy. It's not like he'll have a chance to, prove himself had he lost that fight or whatever. It's not like Paige Van Zandt. Like, she's in a weird spot right now where it's like, what is her worth on the open market? We don't even really know. But with Chandler, to me, him getting the win he did, the way he got it, first round finish, A+ performance, Chandler was the guy of the weekend. There's no question about that.
Yeah. No, and I had Chandler on my list, but I had a couple other ones as backups just in case. But Valorita, I thought was, and for a few reasons. Obviously, she had a lot of hype coming into the fight. And I feel like she almost cashes in on every performance she has so far. She kind of gets hit, I think, with that a label as like almost like a beautiful girl that maybe can't fight, things like that. We saw guys like Curtis Blades kind of criticize girls like that. I think Pearl Gonzalez was one of the ones that he was kind of talking about on Instagram or Twitter. But I think Lareda's kind of proving that title wrong. I mean, she got a highlight knockout, and I mean, if that's not enough, I think she appeased a lot of casual fans too with the dance afterwards. I mean, anywhere I looked, that clip was popping up. Even my brother, who barely watches MMA, was like mentioned last night. I didn't even know he knew who Loretta was, but he's like, oh, she's my new favorite fighter. And I think that also is really good for Bellator too, because if you think about these people that are kind of casual fans, I mean, what a good job for Bellator too, because I feel like they have a hard time almost getting people sometimes like that, where like the UFC does a lot better job of kind of attracting those casual fans. So what better way than for someone kind of just, scrolling through Instagram to see Valerita and like, oh wait, she doesn't fight for the UFC, and then you see that she's a Bellator fighter, then maybe you look a little more into there too. And I also thought her post-fight press conference too, she was kind of crying, and I just thought she was like super raw, like super genuine. And I think that's like something, easy to root for. And then if you want to talk about easy to root for, I mean, Jorge Masvidal is her teammate, and he's another guy that a lot of people are behind right now, so she has that connection as well. I just thought she has a lot going with, for her. So to me, I thought maybe she was – I do agree with Chandler, but I thought Loretta makes a good case as well.
She did, but if she lost that fight, it's not a big deal. She's young. She's super young, actually. If she lost that fight, she could get back on the horse like Aaron Pico. Like, it doesn't really matter in terms of that. By the way, did you notice she kept referencing how Graf said demoralizing, or what was it? Not demoralizing. Yeah, it was demoralizing. That was from my interview with Tara on MMA News, if you guys noticed. So obviously she's been watching my stuff, which is good. By the way, we have some breaking news. It kind of ties into this whole WMMA thing. Paige Van Zandt officially signing with Bare Knuckle as of right now.
What? Oh
Yep.
my God.
I don't get
No.
that move. I know they're handing her a bunch of money. I'm assuming I've been hearing this for a while, but just the fact that like, you know, her moneymaker for the most part is her appearance. like what, like that bare knuckles where you go. If you look like, no, I love Jason Knight, but like if you look like Jason Knight, it makes sense if you want to go fight in bare knuckle. But Paige Van Zandt, I don't know. I'm not on board this whole bare knuckle thing. It's not as appealing to me as it is the other people. But like of all things for her to do, I think this is a really bad move. But yeah, we're just reacting to this now, obviously.
You know what? I love ranting about bare knuckle because I feel like, you know, I'm like the guy that secretly doesn't like it, but, you know, because, you know, we got to be men. We got to love that shit. Yeah, I mean, it does. You know, I talked to Chris Lieben, and one of the big things I was curious about is like, listen, for bare knuckle, like, is that a route that younger fighters might take? And, you know, Chris Lieben was like, no, like, you're going to take so much damage, so much scar tissue. Like, it's going to give you problems in your career. But listen, bare knuckle, the biggest thing I hate against them is when they take MMA fighters away from these promotions. Like I had a Fernanda on, I think back in like January, February, and she's like, well, who are they taking? The greatest of all time, Artem Lobov. Like, could you imagine how fun he'd be in like a PFL or something? Thiago Alves thought he could have been a big name that boost. Paige Van Zandt and Bellator. But to come back to Paige, how does this make sense? You're like, the biggest knock on you is, oh, you like modeling more than fighting. You like to look good. You will literally not look good after you fight at bare knuckle. Like, how does that make sense? Is there really that amount of money that's going to be worth the broken knuckles as well as the broken face? Like,
some of the numbers I've been hearing behind the scenes are pretty good, so I'm sure that's part of it. But
yeah, well, I
have to imagine this is like a short-term thing because, like, if she's gonna fight like even like 4 fights in there, that's just you're risking a lot. And I mean, it's just you know, I know some people are gonna say it's misogynistic, but it's not. I mean, that's part of the sport is marketing yourself. We just talked about Valerie Loretta. If Valerie Loretta didn't look the way she did, does she get as much attention? Probably not. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. It's got to be the total package. So yeah, I'm a bit surprised by that. Bellator seemed like a slam dunk. They're trying to build up that flyweight division. Her husband's there. Like they could have promoted her on all the other platforms that Viacom has. Like what? I don't know. I guess
Scott Coker. What are you doing, Scott? Like this is the kind of thing, Scott Coker. This is a slam. You got Corey Anderson, and you couldn't reel in the fish that was like right there, like out of the pond. Like, come on, Scott. Like this is the kind of thing, like, you know, he would thrive in. So I'm a little bit disappointed. Even if he makes it happen, like, you know, the moneymaker is, you know, it's not going to be the same. But I'm very confused by this.
Anyways, didn't mean to throw off your show, but I saw this on Twitter. I was like, we got to talk about a good segue there. That's not all about the segues. So.
Yeah, exactly. For sure. I mean, those before and after pictures, I'm interested in seeing her before bare knuckle than after. It's gonna be something. And then Lucas, just going to you, your biggest winner from the weekend. Oh, I think we might have lost Lucas.
The biggest winner is I mean, I totally get what you're saying as far as that goes, but yeah, in terms of Valerie Loretta, and it's good. I think Bellator has done a good job with certain, you know, prospects. They have certain stars where they've really, you know, built around them. And it was good that you put Loretta on this card because obviously really good main event. Mm-hmm. Like that was the highlight of the prelims. That and AJ Agazarm acting like a big baby after losing to Lecchione. But no, you're right. Like I think what they're doing with Bellator is smart. Here's the benefit that Bellator has that UFC doesn't, because their undercards are primarily fighters that are from like the local scene. They can get away with signing like a 1-0 fighter, whereas the UFC. Like, look at Chase Hooper. He just got absolutely destroyed in his last fight. Like, what do you do with him now? You can't cut him. You need to give him the easiest matchups possible. Like, they're in a tougher situation where someone like Valerie, they can give her like a 1-on-1 fighter like Tara Graf, and it's not a big deal. They can continue to build her up. So that's something that's interesting too. Yeah,
because she obviously like has a lot more to do in the sport. I mean, she's so young in her career, and like she's not fighting like the cream of the crop yet. And I don't think she should be. I kind of like how Bellator's kind of been moving her along, and I think they've done somewhat of a decent job. I mean, there's some other ones that off the top of my head I could think of too that maybe they didn't do a great job, but I feel like with Bellator, sometimes they have done a really good job of just slowly building some of these guys where, like you were saying too, maybe some guys got pushed too hard.
Yeah, it's got to be somewhere. And someone was asking me about the matchmaking as we're getting Lucas back. I'll just finish my point. I actually think I made this point to Lucas. You got to build up Valerie somewhere in between Michael Venom Page's slow, like literally like 30 miles an hour type build, and Aaron Pico, where it's like, here's Zach Freeman, who like nearly beat Thiago Moises in RFA. Here's your first fight. Like they got to do something in between there.
Yeah, so sorry guys. I guess the Wi-Fi crapped out or something. That's just that will not happen when I get back.
Couldn't handle Paige Van Zandt going to bare knuckle. That's what happened.
Oh my god!
I think he was just trying to build the suspense of his answer. I think.
Yeah, exactly.
So who's your biggest winner, Lucas?
Oh, that's right. I still didn't answer the question. Unfortunately, I have to go with I'm gonna have to go with Michael Chandler. There's Valerie Loretta. I like it, but for me it's Michael Chandler. Listen, who has knocked out Benson Henderson the way he has? Literally no one. I think the last guy to finish him was prime Anthony Pettis. Oh no, it's RDA, right? So yeah, so knocking him out, I mean, it's really impressive, especially in that fashion. So yeah, for me, it's Michael Chandler. I mean, you get the big win, you're in this huge position. Everybody's talking about your next move. Like, you have everyone waiting for you. Unfortunately, we were waiting for Paige Van Zandt, but she messed that up. So hopefully Michael Chandler can right that wrong. So yeah, for me, it's him. I mean, he's in such a great spot. If he'd gotten starched, then I mean, obviously, there's that. But no, he's in a great spot. I think, people might be surprised not talking about maybe Derek Lewis, who probably still needs to take a dump. But, this was like the classic Derek Lewis performance. And, it was good. But, Michael Chandler's in such a better spot. So, yeah, for me, it's easily MC.
Another one, and I don't think he was the biggest winner, but maybe like an honorable mention. But I was thinking maybe like a Sabah Homazi as well. A win over Curtis Millender, and then everything with his family and Lebanon and everything. He dedicated the fight to them. I thought that was kind of a standout one as well.
Yeah, I will disagree with you on that one, but that's fine. Listen, that's the whole point of the show. We got to disagree. I know you covered the card, so it's fresh in your mind. I get that way too when I cover events, but no, definitely an upset. Definitely an upset for sure. As far as that goes, I thought Millender was going to knock him out. That didn't happen. Man, Curtis Millender, I love the guy, but what a disappointment he's been after. Yeah. Remember, he had that highlight reel win over Thiago Alves. It's like, what happened? So unfortunate for him, but yeah, I mean, good to see Hamasi back in the win column. But I mean, this guy's never going to fight for a title. If he does, all the Sabah Hamasi fans come after me, but I just don't see that ever happening.
Yeah.
Well, another big winner for me, if we're throwing out a big winner, like a winner, somebody who's in a really good position, like a sort of sneaky name, was Yusuf Zalal. Like, I thought that performance really good. Win streak. I'm excited for him. I'm trying.
Him and Grant Dawson are going to be a big problem for people at featherweight if Grant can, get the weight down a little bit. But yeah, I was super impressed by him. And Dariush, we got to throw him out because he's really turned things around, getting that win over Holtzman. Yeah, excited to see where he goes because he almost looks like a top 10, top 5 guy at this point. He's looking great.
For sure. And one of the things too, I think last time we had you on, James, we were kind of talking about. I think that was right after the Max Roscoff fight and everything, and with that, Austin Hubbard, obviously, not getting off the stool for Max, but right before the show, I think he was released by the UFC. What'd you kind of make of all that?
It's unfortunate. I think the UFC's got to give a little bit more leeway to guys who take fights on short notice because that's what Max did. He did them a favor, and you're repaying him by cutting him because he decided to quit in a fight. Like, it sets a bad precedence because now what happens if you have more Anthony Smith situations where, his corner should have thrown it in and he took unnecessary damage and he didn't need to do it. We should be commending things like this. Like, I could understand if Max had walked down the ramp and he's like, I'm done. Like, look what happened to Ray Borg. He got cut. Fair enough. Ray's had, I don't know how many opportunities to make weight. I know he's had stuff outside the cage, but really it's just Ray, I think more than anything is just bad luck and just, bad decisions on his part. But someone like Max, like a young guy like that, I know he'll be back probably, but it's unfortunate. I think it really sets a bad precedence for fighters on the roster.
Well, I have to disagree a little bit and probably with Connor as well. But, usually the UFC is really good about guys stepping in on short notice and making sure they get that fight. And sometimes they'll even keep you a little bit too long. Like, we've seen guys on, I think, four fight losing streaks. And, they stepped up on short notice. They're pretty good about that. In my opinion, it made sense to release them. I think, I think the big issue was that this made such bad press, right? Like, you're trying to move away from this sort of, we're barbarians, human cockfighting and stuff like that. And then you sort of have this just bleed, like, I don't want to go out there. Yes, you are, damn it, you're going to find out. Like, I think it made such a negative press that in this one, if you're the UFC, you're almost like, even though it's maybe not his fault because, right, it could have, his coach could have been a lot more discreet about it. I think if you're the UFC, you're like, listen, everyone said you're not ready necessarily for the UFC. You put sort of a bad image out there of us a little bit, whether he meant to do it or not. And, for me, it's kind of a situation where it almost didn't make sense, especially from a marketing perspective, to bring him back. Because, the narrative there is, oh, this guy quit last time. Does he really have it this time? The UFC, I feel like for the UFC, we know that as soon as there's way too much drama going on, especially for a prelim fighter, they're like, all right, get out of here. We're not into all that. So I definitely wasn't surprised. It's a good move for him as long as there's no bad blood with the UFC. Like, listen, you go out there, get a really impressive win streak. We'll bring you back. Awesome. If it's like, listen, you're done forever, then it's definitely a shitty situation. But I wasn't surprised by it. And I think it was maybe perhaps the right move for him, especially since he still needs time to grow and, get a little bit better.
Why not loan him though? Like, they've done that before. They did that. I remember when the UFC card was canceled. I know this is kind of a different situation, but remember when the COVID knocked out that card and all those guys on the London card fought in Cage Warriors, and they've done that with fighters in Invicta as well. Like I think Pearl Gonzalez as well, when they cut her, it was kind of like, well, we're just going to put you in Invicta and see how you do. Yeah. They should have done the same thing with LFA and not like a developmental deal, but just say like, look, we're still going to own you. They would have come out and said that and said like, look, like we understand it didn't go well. We think he needs a little bit more seasoning, but we're going to thank him for taking the fight on short notice. Here, go to LFA, but you're still our property. If they had done it that way, I think that would have been ideal. But at the same time, like I understand it. It's just, again, I do worry a bit that they're going to say like, hey, if you quit, that's it. You're out. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm just a little worried about that.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure. Yeah. He's so like young in his career too. But me and Lucas were kind of talking about this beforehand. So I think that's why he kind of knows where I was leaning with the whole thing. But like with Max too, though, I think a lot of people forget that he did take this fight on 5 days notice. So I thought that should be taken into account a little bit too. I mean, he did get this last minute. That's a big spot for a guy who only has 5 fights and didn't know about the fight, a week ago. So, I just thought I was surprised too. And I was also surprised too because, I mean, obviously we've seen Dana go back on things before, but, I mean, he even kind of gave him that backing in the post-fight press conference too. I thought maybe that might help Max out a little bit, but unfortunately not. But just, kind of getting tight here. One thing I want to talk about that Lucas kind of wanted to bring up too was Bellator made a big signing, and it was kind of, I think it was right before the fight night too on Friday. Corey Anderson, signed. How big of a signing is this for a Bellator? We'll start with Lucas on this one. Let's get your opinion.
Wow. God, get to go first. Better not.
He was surprised. You could tell he wasn't expecting it.
Yeah. So what is this? Oh, all right. Well, listen, it's, in terms of if you're like someone like us, like we're following everything, we know tons of names. It's a great signing, right? Like 205, if you start to look at their division, like half of it is like the boring fighters from the UFC a few years ago. Some of them like Liam McGeary, right? It's like an exciting, sort of prospect, even though his biggest win is Tito Ortiz. So that's a little bit worrying, but their division is a little bit of a weird one. Like even Bader was able to go up to 265 or heavyweight, I should say, and, fight for the title there. And he didn't really, it didn't leave a mess behind at 205. So they needed a name like Corey. Hopefully Corey can be exciting, give us some good fights. But if we're looking at it from sort of in the bubble of MMA, it's a great signing. They needed it. 205 needed a bigger name. Stepping outside of it a little bit in terms of casual fans and stuff, nothing. No waves, no not like who, if people aren't going to be that excited about a Corey Anderson signing. But I think, if you're in the bubble, if you're like us, if you're following it, you see the value in a Corey Anderson going to Bellator for both parties too.
Yeah, I think it made a little ripple. Not that much though. Like it's not a huge name. Corey never won a title. He never fought for a title. He's coming off a loss. But I get it from his perspective, right? Because like losing to Blachowicz, he's back of the line again as far as contenders go. He beat their contender Johnny Walker last year, which is crazy to think like how a fight can really change things, like him losing to Blachowicz. But I think in general, like, Bellator needs more light heavyweights. Like Bader's been very inactive at 205. I know part of that is because he took the heavyweight, he's in the heavyweight tournament and won the title. But I think it just gets their division moving a little bit more. Corey's not like known as like an exciting guy, but he is sort of in the prime right now. And he's definitely worked on his striking. Like that Johnny Walker performance is pretty incredible what he was able to do at 244. I remember no one expected him to knock out Johnny Walker. I think if anything, they thought he'd win a decision with his wrestling. So I think it's a good move for Bellator and it's fine for the UFC. They're at this point right now, they're not going to miss him. I kind of disagree with what you were saying earlier about Bader, because I think there were a couple fights that they were trying to make for John Jones and for other fights that they could have used like a Ryan Bader at that point. They were getting some pretty lackluster fights at 205. It was shallow there for a bit, but with this one, 205 so crowded right now. You've got you got this Anthony Smith and Rakic fight coming up. You've got Glover and Thiago Santos. You've got Blachowicz. You've got Dominic Reyes. So right now, Corey would have been lost in the shuffle anyway. So right now, it's not really going to impact them. And I think with Corey's age, it's not like he's 20. Like for him to go to Bellator, it's just the right move. It's honestly, it's one of those few moves where it's good. It's better for both parties, I think, at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a great timing too, because like you said, I mean, Bader's been kind of inactive in that 205. I think last time he fought there was like 2017. So, I mean, you're signing this guy, about maybe 2 weeks before he goes to defend his belt too. And too bad they can't have like fans or anything like that, because they could, put Anderson kind of cage side, do a little like video of him, just be like, oh, recently signed light heavyweight, that kind of thing. Maybe like build it up eventually. But yeah, I thought
with the news though, it leaked out like, his manager's Ali is feeding that to ESPN. So it's tough to do that in this day and age, right? Like it's just the way it is.
Yeah. Well, no, I just mean like even just like show him like he already signed, just be like, oh, newly signed guy. Like obviously everyone knows he signed, But
Couldn't get the Bellator private jet to New Jersey in time, I guess. That was the issue.
There you go.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding, obviously, but yeah.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, they don't have a private jet. Come on, guys. This is Bellator.
Yeah, I know. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, that pretty much wraps it up. I mean, obviously, we got a lot to look forward to this weekend, too. It seems like the UFC train keeps on rolling. I mean, UFC 250, huge card, too. I mean, I guess before we go, anything that, like, you know, just kind of quick hits here, anything that really, like, are you looking forward to this week? Obviously, the Miocic Cormier stands out.
Yeah, such a huge fight. I've said this, I don't know how many times on podcasts and whatever. This will determine the best heavyweight of all time on Saturday. I don't think people are giving that enough credit with what both Cormier and Miocic have done at heavyweight. So a lot on the line for both guys. You don't want to miss that main event. Co-main event, Sean O'Malley and Chito Vera is such an awesome fight. I see all these people saying, oh, Chito Vera's not ranked, all this stuff. It's like, look, he won his last fight. He should be ranked. And the guy's never been finished in his career. So if Sean O'Malley can't finish Chito Vera in the very first round, it's going to be pretty interesting to see what happens the rest of the fight. So don't count out Chito Vera on Saturday night. Junior Dos Santos, does he still have it? We'll find out against a guy in Rosenstruik who's had a really weird career, had some quick wins, and then loses to Ngannou, was losing against Overeem, knocks him out. So a lot of interesting stuff there. Undercard, not that great, but I think the main card, there's a lot of good fights there, but pretty solid pay-per-view on Saturday. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad you rattled off some of those names. I was trying to dig for the card real quick, but yeah, the Junior.
Gotta have the memory like me, Lucas. There you go. No,
sorry. I was such an old man. Like I really struggle, but. Now, the Junior Dos Santos fight, I'm curious about because Junior's had this issue where he doesn't get knocked out like flatline, but he tends to take a big punch. And if you notice in all the fights where he gets knocked out, he has that same position, right, where he's sitting there and getting rained on. So for me, this fight's going to tell us sort of where is he at this point? Can you take any damage at all? So that fight's interesting, but I mean, that headliner, I mean, you know, the co-main event's a fun one, right? Is Sugar Sean for real or whatever it is his hair really that great with the Ecuador flag? But I mean, the main event, like anytime you're talking something about, you know, the GOAT, both the first fights delivered. I mean, you know, it's such a great fight. Like for me, that has to stand out. Like the rest of the fights are decent, but that main event, like there's just so much storyline there. Like, you know, and even, you know, the winner potentially facing John Jones, is Daniel Cormier really retiring? Like there's so much stuff that for me, that main event just stands out really above everything else.
Yeah, that main event is definitely like the standout. One guy I'm actually kind of interested in seeing this, and maybe it's just because I like covered him when we were talking about prospects, but like Merab Dvalishvili too. I mean, I think he's got a pretty big step up in John Dodson I know Merab, I think it's four straight wins, but I mean, if you look at, I think just more recently too, like on paper, I think Dodson's kind of had the tougher go as of recently. But just again, talking about kind of contenders, guys coming up. I mean, we have CFFC. So for people that don't know that, I mean, a lot of guys are kind of coming out of that promotion. That's something to look forward to. There's card tonight, card tomorrow night. And I think that's pretty much it. Anything before we let you go, James?
No, just thanks for having me on, guys. Always appreciate it. I love the mix of, you know, the media talk and the fight talk and stuff, and love talking trash with you guys. I love to see that you can hold your own, and you're not going to hate me after this. So it's all good. Your audience can follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at Lynch on Sports. You guys can subscribe to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Lynch on Sports. That's where I put all my content. So even though you might not see the interview and the notification, check the playlist. I always got my interviews on there. And thanks so much for having me on, guys. Returning guest, I'm honored. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this was good. This is like not the first time, but I feel like a lot of times it's really easy. Like everyone agrees with each other. This was nice. We had some little heat debate. I think maybe friendships will be tested.
I gave you a hard time about covering that event. I regret that. I do. I shouldn't have done that, but it's okay as long as you have me back on.
I can take it.
Yeah, there you go. That's good.
How about you, Lucas? Anything before we head out of here?
Sure. I have a whole long spiel that I have to end the show with. Of course, follow me on social media at Grandsire MMA, Twitter, Instagram. Don't add me on Facebook. I'm really boring on Facebook. There's no fight talk. I have weird fans add me all the time. Do not add me. There's really no point in doing that. Subscribe on YouTube, Lucas Grandsire. I always appreciate it when you do. And if you're watching this and you happen to be some kind of big editor, someone that decides who gets hired, hire me, damn it. Sorry, James, but hire me. Give me a chance. Like we're talking about prospects and investments right here. Also, if you're in charge of Between the Links and you need some kind of new fresh blood, a young challenger, your guy, like all my callouts have fallen flat on Twitter, but eventually I will start to make waves. And James, appreciate you for coming on, man. It's always good. And I feel like this was a really good show. I like like you guys mentioned, sort of the back and forth and having different opinions. So yeah, that's my spiel.
All right. Guys, make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook. It's Deep Water MMA Podcast. Also our Twitter at MMA_deep. My personal Twitter is at CNorthrup732. You can check that as well. Thanks again, James. One last time. Thank you to Miami News and Eric for letting us put the show on as well. A lot of MMA action, as we've mentioned, and enjoy the fights this weekend, guys. Thanks.